Recording in progress.
السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقه قولي رب زدني علما اللهم فقهنا في الدين آمين يا رب العالمين. Inshallah, today we are going to continue from the book of Tajweed that we started last week. So inshallah, we're just going to continue from the chapter of Introduction to Tajweed. And inshallah, today we're going to cover from Al-Basmallah Bayna Suratain. So we learned that anytime we begin recitation of the Quran, we should start off with the Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. This is from the Sunnah of the Prophet. It is also something that we have learned that we should do before every single surah. So inshallah, anytime we are reciting from the beginning of a surah, we should start off with Bismillah, except in one case of Surah Tawbah. In that case, you will not read Bismillah if you are starting from the beginning of the surah. Also, if you are stopping the recitation, for example, you begin talking or you are eating, you leave your spot and then you continue recitation, in that case as well, you should start off with Bismillah. Any other thing that you start off should also begin with Bismillah. So eating, for example, going to the bathroom, changing your clothes, whatever it is, inshallah, we should try to get into the habit of starting with Bismillah. And inshallah, this will bring barakah in whatever it is that we are doing. So especially when it comes to the recitation of Quran, we should say the Bismillah, especially when we start the beginning of a surah. Now, inshallah, we are going to discuss Al-Basmallah Bayna Suratain. So saying the Bismillah between two surahs. So in the recitation of Hafs and Asim, which is the one that we are studying currently, there are three or actually four different ways that we are starting and saying the Basmallah and then continuing on to the next surah. So this is applicable to every single surah except between Surah Al-Anfal and Surah Tawbah. The reason for that, like I mentioned, is Surah Tawbah does not have Bismillah in the beginning. So in that case, these three examples will not be applicable when it comes to the Basmallah. But in every other case between the two surahs, there is going to be four different ways of starting and saying the Basmallah. Three of them are going to be allowed and one of them is not allowed. So here we have the three that are allowed, and then inshallah we'll mention the one that you are not allowed to do. So let's go ahead and move on to the first one, and this is qat'u kull, separating all of them. So this basically means that when you are reciting the surah, you are going to say the last ayah of the surah, you are going to pause, and then you are going to say Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, and then again you are going to pause, and then you will start the beginning of the next surah. So in this case, you are separating all of them. You are separating the last ayah of the first surah, you are separating Bismillah, and then you are separating the first ayah of the next surah. So this is qat'ul kull, separating all of them. So an example of this is here given, وَمِن شَرِّ حَاسِدٍ إِذَا حَسَدَ. And then you are going to pause, you can take a breath, then you are going to continue, Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. And then pause again, you are going to take a breath, and then begin the next surah, قُلْ أَعُوذُ بِرَبِّ النَّاسِ. So that is the first example that you can do. Basically, you are separating all three of these. You are separating the first surah from the Bismillah from the second surah. So this is if you are reading in continuation. For example, you are reading the Quran, then you are going to stop between all three of these things. Then we have the second example, waslul kull, joining all of them. And in the previous one, we were stopping for a breath between each one. And in this case, we are not going to stop. We are going to read all of them in one single breath. Okay, so when we are reciting, we are going to start off with the last ayah of the first surah. In that same breath, begin Bismillah. In that same breath, say the first ayah of the next surah. So this is also allowed. You are allowed to do this if you would like to read it in this way. So for example, وَمِن شَرِّ حَاسِدٍ إِذَا حَسَدَ بِسْمِ اللَّهِ الرَّحْمَنِ الرَّحِيمِ قُلْ أَعُوذُ بِرَبِّ النَّاسِ. So that is this example. So you see in this one, I did not pause when it came to the last ayah. I did not pause after the Basmallah, and I read all of them in continuation. So this method is also allowed. You are allowed to do this if you would like to do so. Then we have the third example. So in this example, wasl basmala bi awwal as-surah. So you are also allowed to do this as well, that when you are reciting, you are going to say the last verse of the surah. Okay, so if you are reciting, this is the last verse of the surah, and then you are going to pause. Then you are going to recite the basmala and the first ayah in the same breath. So now what we're doing here is that we are saying that this ayah here, we are going to pause after this. So we are completing the surah, we are taking a breath. That surah is done with now. Then we are beginning the basmala and we are combining that with the first ayah of the next surah. So the surah and the basmala go together because you are saying the basmala every time you begin the surah. So of course, when you are beginning the surah with the first ayah, the basmala should also be joined with that. So you are going to say, وَمِن شَرِّ حَاسِدٍ إِذَا حَسَدٍ. And then you are going to pause, you are going to take a breath, then you can continue, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, قُلْ أَعُوذُ بِرَبِّ النَّاسِ. So in this case, now I am joining the Basmallah with the beginning of the surah. So here I am taking a breath at the end of the last surah, saying Basmallah and the next ayah in the same breath. So these are the three ways that you can say the Basmallah, and all three of these ways are allowed. So when you are reciting, if you want to do any of these three ways, you can do that. Most of the time, people find it more comfortable to do the first way, taking a breath in between each. If you do hear any reciters doing 2 or 3, that's also okay. So that is totally fine. If you yourself want to do that as well, and you find that, the ayats aren't too long, you can read them in one breath, you can go ahead and do that. Sometimes in faster recitations as well, people prefer to read as many ayahs together as they can. So you are allowed to do the method that is the second and the third one. Now, I mentioned that there are 4 ways. 3 of them are allowed, 1 of them is not allowed. So this 4th way that is not allowed is that when you are reciting, you basically combine the last ayah with the basmallah, then you pause, and then you recite the next ayah. So you are not allowed to do this. The reason for this is that the basmallah is there because you are beginning a new surah. So it does not make sense for you to combine the basmallah with the end of the last surah. And I'll give you an example of this. وَمِن شَرِّ حَاسِدٍ إِذَا حَسَدَ بِسْمِ اللَّهِ الرَّحْمَنِ الرَّحِيمِ. And then I pause. قُلْ أَعُوذُ بِرَبِّ النَّاسِ. So in this case, what I did is that I combined the basmallah with the ending of the last surah, but I did not combine it with the ayah that comes first. So you are not allowed to do this. The reason for this is that basmallah should be combined with this ayah. So either if you are saying the last ayah with the basmallah, you have to combine it with this ayah as well. You cannot continue this and then stop here. Okay, so you are not allowed to do that. And again, you want to make sure that the basmallah is joined with this ayah. So either you read all 3 of them together, or you pause between each 3, or you pause between this one. So those are the only 3 options you have. You cannot say this ayah with the basmallah and then pause and then recite the new surah. So this is the way that is incorrect. So you should not do this last way. It is not allowed. So these are the 3 ways that you are going to say the basmallah bayna suratain, between 2 surahs. Now, inshallah, let's move on to the next topic. This topic is known as maratibul qira'ah, the 3 types of recitation, or the 3 levels of recitation when it comes to the Quran. So first we have al-tahqiq. So this is the one when you are reading the Quran slowly and with serenity while pondering the meaning and observing the Tajweed rules. So this is when you give every letter its right, along with the makharij, along with the slifat. You are pulling the meds to the exact length which it should be lengthened, and you are following all of the rules of Tajweed. You are also following a tafkhim and tarqiq, which means that the letters that are heavy are meant to be heavy. You are reading them as heavy, and the letters that that are light, you are reading them as light. So this means basically that you are following every single rule of tajweed to the best of your ability. And this is the best level of recitation. So this is also what is meant when it comes in the Quran, وَرَتِّلِ الْقُرْآنَ تَرْتِيلًا, that you recite the Quran in slow, measured tones. This is the recitation, and this is the best level of reading. Most of the time when we are reciting, we should aim to go into this level. Then we have the second type of recitation, which is al-hadr. And this is the swift, fast reading of the Quran. Most of the time you will find this when it comes in Taraweeh. So for example, during Ramadan, when the goal is that you want to finish as much Quran as possible, a lot of these shuyukh will do al-hadr recitation. So the reciters will recite very fast. Now, something very important when it comes to this type of fast recitation, you should still maintain the rules of tajweed. So you have to make sure that when you are reciting, you do not make the mad or the lengthened letters shorter than they have to be. So if, for example, the mad has to be 4 counts, you have to make it 4 counts no matter what. Even if you are reciting fast, you have to make that mad 4 counts or 6 counts, however many it is. Also, if there's a 2-count mad, you cannot make it shorter and make it 1 count. Also, if there is a ghunna, you cannot get rid of that. Inshallah, we'll cover more what ghunna is, what all of these rules are. Basically, all of the letters or the rules of tajweed, you have to follow them even if you're reciting the Quran fast. Also, not to shorten the vowels to the point that the reading is not correct. So what this means is that sometime when you are reciting, you are saying Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. So for example, you're reciting it really fast. This does not mean that you are going to start dropping the mad, start dropping the rules of tajweed. Even if you are reciting fast, you still have to follow all of the rules. So this is something that is just, I wanted to point out that even if you are reciting fast, for example, during Ramadan, you are trying to finish the Quran, whatever it is, whatever the reason, if you are reciting fast, you still have to follow the rules of tajweed. So this does not mean that you start dropping mudud, dropping the gunna, making some of these letters shorter than they are supposed to be. So again, even if you are reciting fast, we still want to maintain that level of tajweed. Now we have the third level of tajweed. This is a level that is between 2 of these. So a lot of the times we tend to use this, especially when we are praying. We should aim for the first one. This is the best level of recitation. But a lot of the times when we are reciting the Quran, we don't really get to have as much time to ponder, to reflect, to give every letter as much haqq as it deserves. Most of the time we do tend to go into this third level. This is also all right as long as we are preserving and observing the rules of tajweed. So again, this is all based on circumstance. All 3 of these are okay to do as long as you are maintaining tajweed. So that is the best thing, that you are maintaining tajweed. If you are reciting very, very slowly, you will notice in some recitations, for example, that are taken from Qiyam al-Layl. So when the night prayers during Ramadan, you will hear some recitations on YouTube, and you will see that the shuyukh are reading very, very slowly. Alhamdulillahi. It's very slow. So this is a tahqiq. Hadr is faster than that, usually in Taraweeh. And then we have tadweer, which is most of the time people do recite with this just because we don't have that much time to be reciting very long, very slow recitation of the Quran. So these are, again, just the 3 levels of Quran. Most important thing to remember, you do have to have the rules of tajweed in all of these. So you cannot take out any rule of tajweed, even if you are reciting fast. So inshallah, let's move on to now the next topic, which is going to be the principles of tajweed. So this is basically the importance of tajweed. What is tajweed? So tajweed is the science. This is the science of the recitation of the Quran. And there are several principles when it comes to the science of tajweed that we should know if we are beginning to learn tajweed. So now we have the definition, by linguistic definition, meaning what exactly does tajweed mean in Arabic? Now, if you take it in the most basic form, tajweed means at-tahsin. Tajweed means betterment. It means beautification. So if we are doing tajweed on something, we are making something beautiful. So this is the Arabic definition of tajweed. We are doing tahseen from hasan. We are making something beautiful. We are making something better. And in this case, we are making our recitation better. We are beautifying and adorning our recitation with the application of tajweed. And you will notice that when you are reciting with tajweed, the Quran that you recite becomes more beautiful, more pleasant to the ears. So for example, if I am reciting Surah Fatiha and I say, Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. So every single letter that I am pausing on, that I am reciting with its correct right, then that is making my recitation better and more beautiful to Allah. So that is what tajweed means. It means at-tahseen. Now the applied definition, specifically in Islam, what does tajweed mean? Tajweed means articulating every letter from its articulation point and giving the letter its rights and dues of characteristics. So a lot of big words here, inshallah. As we go on to the rules of tajweed, you will notice what this means. It means that you are reciting every letter from the correct makharij. Makharij means the exit point of each letter. So for example, we have the letter qaf. Qaf is a heavy letter. You have to recite qaf the way that the Prophet recited this letter. Also, we have to give every single letter its rights and dues of characteristics, meaning that sometimes letters are heavy. You have to make these letters heavy. Sometimes some letters have med on it. You have to lengthen these letters. So all of these rules that are applied into tajweed, you have to make sure that you are doing all of them in order to give every letter its right. So again, this is mentioned here, haqqul harf, the rights of the letters are its required characteristics that never leave it. And then we have mustahaqqul harf, the dues of the letters are its presented characteristics that are present in it some of the time and not present at other times. Basically what this means is that some letters in and of itself always have these traits. So for example, the letter qaf is always heavy. And then for example, we have idgham, which is circumstantial. Inshallah, as we move on, we will cover that. You don't need to know this right now. Basically, all you have to take away from this applied definition is that you have to give every letter its haqq. So every single tajweed rule that can be applied to this letter, you should apply it. And that is what tajweed means, that you learn all of these rules and then you recite the Quran the way that it was recited to the Prophet ﷺ from Jibreel. And then also we have its formation. So where did tajweed come from? The tajweed comes from the words of the Quran, and also some honorable hadiths as well have mentioned that we should use tajweed. So tajweed is not something that scholars made up many years after the Prophet. Tajweed has always been intrinsically within the words of the Quran. Also, many hadith as well do mention that we should recite with tajweed. Again, like I have said, that ayah وَرَتِّلِ الْقُرْآنَ تَرْتِيلًا, that recite the Quran with slow, measured tones. So this is also attributing to the fact that we should recite with tajweed. Its fruits or its virtues. It is preserving the tongue from mistakes in pronunciation of the glorious Quran when we are reciting. So sometimes what happens is if we are reciting the Quran and we make a mistake, it is possible that we could get sin from that mistake. If we are changing the meaning of the Quran, that is actually a sin. So when we learn tajweed, we learn the correct recitation of the Quran. We are making sure that we are not applying any sins or mistakes from reading the Quran in a way that's different from what the Prophet had received. So that is why we should learn tajweed. Its precedence or its importance, it is one of the most honored of the sciences and one of the best of them due to its relation to Allah's words. So when you are learning tajweed, this is something that you get ajr for. Every single word that you are learning, every rule that you learn, you are getting reward for this. And it is very honorable in the sight of Allah. So again, it is one of the Islamic law sciences that are related to the Quran. So we already covered this. Tajweed is a science in Islam in the recitation of the Quran. Its founder. So again, where did tajweed come from? It did not come from some random scholars after the death of the Prophet many years later. Tajweed came first and foremost from Allah. So when Allah recited to Jibreel and Jibreel recited to Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, that is where tajweed comes from. So when we are learning the rules of tajweed, we are learning to recite the Quran the way that Allah had revealed it. So again, this is not something made up. This is not something that scholars made up. This is something that we are learning because it came from Allah. And the goal of tajweed should be that we are reciting the Quran the way that it was revealed to the Prophet, the way that the Prophet recited, the way that Jibreel recited. So there is no founder for Tajweed. It is merely what we have to know. So its precept, this is very important. Knowledge of Tajweed is fard kifaya. Fard kifaya basically means that some people in the Muslim community should know Tajweed. Okay? And what this means basically is that we are learning Tajweed now. We are learning the rules. We are learning the names of the rules. So for example, if I tell you that in this spot you have to do Madd al-Iwad, okay, you are doing the name of this rule is Madd al-Iwad. Not everyone knows that the name of that rule is Madd al-Iwad, right? Not everyone knows what idgham is. Not everyone knows what idhar is. So all of these rules, the names of these rules, the application of these rules, everyone does not have to know them. Okay, this is fard kifaya, meaning that some Muslims should know it. They do have to know it. Not everyone in the community has to take, for example, advanced tajweed classes. Not everyone has to learn all of the names of these rules. That is fard kifaya. Now, this is very important. The application of tajweed is fard al-ain. Fard al-ain means every single Muslim must recite the Quran with tajweed. Anytime you recite the Quran, you have to recite the Quran with tajweed. Now, how can you recite tajweed without knowing the rules of tajweed? A lot of the times, for example, when we are listening to the Quran, we are listening to our favorite shuyukh on YouTube, we have to follow their recitation and recite in that same way. So if we hear that in this spot, this sheikh is lengthening this for 6 counts, I don't know why, but I am still going to do it. So this is fard al-ain, meaning that even if you do not know the rules of tajweed, you don't know what is this called, why am I doing this, you still have to do it. So again, not having knowledge of tajweed does not give you an excuse to not recite Quran in the right way, because this is fard al-ain, meaning that you do have to know this. Every single Muslim should strive to learn as much tajweed as they need to in order to recite the Quran correctly. So this is fard al-ain. Even if you don't know the rules, the names of the rules, you should still know how to recite the Quran. And this is again what it means by its application. So everyone must recite the Quran with tajweed, but not everyone has to actually go and study tajweed, if that makes sense. So this is very important. We need to keep this in mind. Every single Muslim should recite the Quran the way that it was revealed to the Prophet. The reasons for its rules. Now, the reason why we have tajweed is because nowadays, mashallah, there are Muslims in every single nation. There are Muslims that don't speak Arabic. And for us to go and learn the new language of Arabic, it is very difficult. And sometimes what happens is that when you are learning a new language, we mispronounce things. We don't know some of those the things that a native speaker would know. Someone who is learning Arabic would not know that. So that is why tajweed was basically written down. This is why tajweed is taught now, because someone, for example, who speaks Urdu is not going to recite the letters the same way that someone who is Arab is going to recite the letters. There is different accents, there is different way of recitation, and we want to make sure that no matter where you are from, you are reciting the Quran the way that it was revealed to Prophet Muhammad. So again, being Arab is not an excuse. Even if you don't speak Arabic, you do have to know tajweed. And this is very important for people who are learning how to basically read the Quran, especially when it comes to people who speak other languages similar to Arabic. So for example, if someone is speaking Urdu, Urdu is similar to Arabic, but there are differences. So we want to make sure when we recite the Quran, it does not sound like Urdu. It should sound like you are Arab. Everyone who is reciting the Quran should sound like a fluent Arab. And the reason for that is because the Quran was revealed in the Arabic tongue, and we need to make sure that we are reciting the Quran the way that it was revealed to Prophet Muhammad. So again, this is like you are learning another language, and the reason why we are learning is so that we can apply the Quran the way that it should be read. Now, its principles. So there are basically 4 different types of categories when it comes to tajweed. Again, we are going to cover all of these things. So the first one is knowledge of the articulation points of the letters. We are going to cover this later on. This basically means al-makharij. Makharij is from the word kharaja, which means to come out. Now, even if you are learning any language, you learn that the way that the mouth moves is going to give you different sounds. So for example, if I round my mouth and I make a sound, ooh. If I close my lips, So doing movements within the mouth is going to give you different sounds. Learning the articulation points of the letters means that you are learning exactly what you have to do with your mouth in order to make the sound of that letter. So for example, if I want to say the letter ba, what do? I open my lips, ba. And that is how I get the sound of the letter ba. So inshallah, we're going to learn all of these. This is one part of tajweed, learning the articulation points of the letters, learning where exactly in the mouth or the throat or the nose the sound is going to come from. Then the second type is the knowledge of the characteristics of the letters. So this is known as sifats. Okay, and inshallah we'll cover this as well. Sifat is basically the characteristics of the letters, meaning some letters will have this characteristic. Some letters in the Arabic alphabet are heavy. The other letters are light. So this is a characteristic of the letters, that some of them are like this, others are like this. When you are reciting, you do have to apply all of these characteristics. Number 3, we have knowledge of what rules change in the letters due to the order of the letters. We'll cover this too as well, but sometimes we will learn rules. So for example, if you have a mad letter followed by a hamza, then the rule is going to change. Then this mad is going to be 4 counts. Sometimes if you have a noon sakina followed by a throat letter, you are going to have idhar. So again, these are all of the rules we will cover later on, but we do need to understand that not every rule is going to apply to every single letter. So for example, if we have noon sakina, it is not always going to be read as an, in, un. It is not always going to be like that. Sometimes it will be I. Okay, sometimes it'll be im. So the sound will change depending on the order of the letters. The rules are going to change, and inshallah we'll cover that later on. Just know that in many of the rules, there are going to be some differences within the sounds because of the order of the letters, and inshallah we'll cover that later as well. Number 4, very important, exercising the tongue and a lot of repetition. So this is something that everyone has to do when you are reciting the Quran. At first, the tajweed is going to be very difficult. You are going to find it difficult, especially if you have learned tajweed, you have learned reading the Quran in a different dialect, in a different accent. It's very hard to change from the way that you grew up reading the Quran. But what we need to do is that you exercise the tongue, meaning that you practice over and over and over and over again. And once you have done this practice, the recitation of the Quran will come very easily to you. So this is something, inshallah, that we should try to do, especially when we are learning tajweed, we are learning new rules. Try to implement them as much as you can. Mark them, circle them in your Quran, make notes, put post-its, whatever you can do, inshallah, to help you remember that you are going to have to do a lot of practice. And inshallah, for all of these things, you are going to get ajr as well. You are getting reward for all of your struggles. So inshallah, we do need to practice a lot when it comes to learning tajweed. Now, inshallah, let's move on to the next topic, which is al-lahan. So al-lahan basically means a mistake or a deviation from correctness when reading. So basically it means lahan is a mistake in the recitation. Now, for lahan, for mistakes, there are 2 different types of mistakes. So first we have lahn al-jali, zahirun. Okay, this means obvious and clear mistakes. In basic terms, what is lahn al-jali? What are obvious, clear mistakes? They are mistakes that change the meaning of the Quran. Okay, these are mistakes that are changing the meaning of the Quran. So there is a word. For example, we have the word qalb. Qalb means heart. Qalb with the letter qaf, heavy qaf, qalb. Now, if I say kalb, kalb means dog. So now, because of that one mistake of heavy and light, I am changing qaf into a heavy kaf sound, right? This one mistake from changing qa to ka is changing the meaning of the word. Now I went from the word heart to the word dog. And this is haram. You cannot do this. This is a sin. When you make a mistake that changes the meaning of the Quran, this is a mistake on your part. So this is something that we should get rid of. We should work to not make any of these kinds of mistakes. Now, a lot of the time, sometimes we have a slip of the tongue, accidentally we say something. That is why it's important to learn tajweed. That is why it's important to read the Quran with a teacher so that you are able to catch your mistakes, so that you are able to know that, this does not sound right, and then you go back and you recite that again. So we want to make sure that we are getting rid of any of these mistakes that are going to cause us basically to have sin upon us. So this type of mistake occurs in the makeup of the word or in the letters. So here, for example, if you recite the letter dal or the letter ta as ba, okay? Or if you have the letter ta and you recite ba as ta. Now you can hear that difference. Ba is different than ta is different than da. All three of these should sound different. And this is something that I've noticed in some languages. All of these letters sound the same. The, ro, za. So all of these sound the same. They should not have similar sounds. All three of these letters are distinct. They are all different. Ba is different than the letter ta. And ta is different than the letter da. So again, this is a mistake. If you mix these three up, if you are reciting them too similar, this can change the meaning of the Quran. Also, if you are changing the dhamma into a fatha, or you are changing fatha into a kasra, zair zabar pesh, if you are changing any of these things, you are changing kasra to a fatha, all of these are also mistakes that change the meaning of the Quran. And these are also mistakes that when you have sukoon. So sukoon is that sign that we learned that you are stopping. If you change the sukoon and you are reading them as a fatha or a kasra. So for example, in Surah Fatiha, we have the word an'amta. So you have sukoon on noon, you have sukoon on the meme. An'amta. And for example, you are reciting and you say an'amta. An'amta is different than an'amta. So in one, I am reading with sukoon. In an'amta, I am putting a fatha on the noon. So this is incorrect. Again, you are changing the meaning of the Quran. So the reason why this is named obvious and clear is because anyone can tell that this is a mistake. Anyone who has the Quran in front of them can tell you this is a mistake. Also, you are changing the meaning of the Quran. That is why these mistakes are obvious. Anyone who is reading the Quran knows you have made a mistake. If I change fatha to kasra, I know you made a mistake. So this type of recitation, no one should make these mistakes. Whether you know tajweed or whether you don't know tajweed, you should not make this type of mistake, again, because it is a sin. Now, the second type of category is lahn al-khafi. Now, these are obscured and hidden mistakes. So these are mistakes that only someone who has learned tajweed will know. So someone who knows tajweed knows that you made a mistake. But this mistake does not change the meaning of the Quran. And for that reason, you do not get a sin if you have accidentally made this mistake. So only those who have knowledge of recitation of the Quran are going to recognize. So for example, if you are reciting, only someone who knows tajweed is going to know, that med wasn't long enough. Or only they will know, you didn't do proper idgham here. Only those people are going to be able to catch these mistakes. So again, these do not change the meaning of the Quran. Therefore, there is no sin upon you if you do make this mistake. So we do have, again, like two different types. So the first is mistakes only known by those knowledgeable in Quran recitation. So for example, like I said, the idgham wasn't long enough. Only someone who knows tajweed is going to be able to tell that this was a mistake. Then we have the second, mistakes only known by skilled readers of the Quran, such as unwanted repetition of the ra. So for example, when we have the letter ra, you have al. Sometimes people say al. So the ra is repeating too much. Only someone who is very skilled, someone who is able to pick up on these things is going to be able to tell that this is a mistake. Also, we have this mistake that when you are reciting the dhamma between a dhamma and fatha. So the dhamma, when you are reciting oo, the lips should be completely rounded. Ooh. Okay, but what happens sometimes is that people don't round the lips all of the way. Now, again, this does not change the sound that much. So if I say ooh, and you say ooh, so in one of them, I am rounding the lips, and the other one, I did not round my lips. You can't really tell a difference that much. But someone who has recited the Quran a lot, someone who has learned tajweed, will be able to tell you that you did not round the lips enough. And skilled reciters, skilled holders of, ijazah of the Quran will be able to tell you that you did this mistake. So again, this is something that you should try to avoid. You should never do them on purpose. So even if you have learned, that this is a mistake that I am doing, try to fix it. If you can fix it, if you do accidentally make a mistake, that's fine. You are not sinned for it. But again, this does not mean that, you do that mistake on purpose. That, oh, it's not a that it's not a very obvious mistake. I won't get sin for it, so I'm not even going to bother learning or correcting this mistake. So you should not try to do that. If you have learned, that something you are doing is wrong, try to fix it. But again, these are things that even if you have not learned tajweed, you don't get sin for them. But you should try to learn tajweed and fix these mistakes if you can. Okay, so inshallah, that brings us to the conclusion of our introduction of tajweed. Inshallah, in the next lecture, we are going to do makharij al-huruf, the articulation points of the letters, or the way that the letters come out of the mouth, exactly what shapes you should put your mouth, or what way you should move your tongue in order to make the Arabic sounds. And inshallah, we will cover that in the next class, inshallah. Jazakallahu khairan kathiran, subhanakallahumma wa bihamdik, nashhadu an la ilaha illa ant, نستغفرك ونتوب إليك. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.